Hey, welcome to SI Now. It is Monday, February 27th, and I'm Maggie Gray. Coming up today, a look at the NFL Scouting Combine, and was the Daytona 500 another nail in the coffin for NASCAR? But we begin today with the NBA, and I'm pleased to welcome in a five-time NBA champion. He played 18 years in the league. Derek Fisher is my guest. He's an analyst for the new Players Only NBA franchise on TNT, and we will get to that in just one moment. But Derek, you saw what happened at the Oscars last night. La La Land mistakenly given the best movie Oscar, then it was taken away. Was this the biggest botch in Los Angeles since Chris Paul to the Lakers was rescinded by David Stern?
A lot of people may feel so, especially Lakers fans. Definitely big news last night, and I'm sure everybody around the world is talking about that one today, like
Yeah,
we are.
I know. We just couldn't help it with the comparison. Obviously, you played for the Lakers for 13 years. You won 5 titles. You know Magic Johnson taking over as president of basketball operations. He says he wants to bring in another former teammate of yours, Kobe Bryant. Now, you know Kobe well. What role would be good for the Black Mamba?
All those roles are taken at the moment. Jeannie Buss is the owner, governor, and obviously her siblings have roles in ownership. And then now that Magic is president, I don't know. I mean, I think Kobe's a guy that is a leader for sure, and would have to be somewhere at the top of the chart. So I don't know if they can create a position for him that would allow for his skill sets to be best utilized. But whatever it is, if he does choose to get involved, it'll be 100% committed to it, and for sure find a way to make it successful.
Derek, what is it like as a former player to go either to coaching like you did or into the front office in some aspect, really without any experience and having to learn on the fly?
Yeah, I think it makes things a little more challenging in terms of getting yourself up to speed. When you go into a high stakes, high pressure job and you haven't been in that position before, you have to work really hard just to get your process together and your systems of how you're going to operate, as opposed to someone that has the experience, having those things figured out already. He's a smart guy. He's a good person. I think he'll figure it out.
Got to ask about one of your former teammates feuding on Twitter, Derek. Shaq and JaVale McGee. It's gotten pretty ugly, but the beef has been squashed with the help of Shaq and JaVale's moms. Moms getting involved. Lucille O'Neal and Pamela McGee stepped in. They ended the Twitter war. I mean, in all your years playing in the league, coaching, have you ever heard of the moms settling a beef before?
Definitely heard of the moms settling beef, just not on Twitter.
Got an example for us? Can you share one of those? I mean, we'd never heard of it before.
Yeah, no. Guys, athletes and their moms are, it's a relationship that few come between. And so, I am not surprised at all. Miss Lucille is a woman's woman in terms of, being a very strong and powerful voice. She has a very amazing influence on Shaq. So I'm not surprised at all that when she called and said it needs to end, that it ended. Shaq, as big as he is and as fun as he is, and he will literally say and do anything at times, he knows better than to go against Miss Lucille's words. So I'm not shocked at all to hear that news.
Mom's getting involved. We got to ask you, of course, about the New York Knicks. You were coach there for a season and a half. I could go through all the ways the Knicks season has come off the rails this year, but I don't have to do that because you've seen up close and personal just how deep the dysfunction can go. Today we heard that the Knicks have waived Brandon Jennings. I don't know, Derek. I mean, is it time for Phil Jackson to step away from the team? Is this, experiment just not working in New York?
Well, I mean, in terms of Phil stepping away from the team, that will be between he and James Dolan in terms of, where they stand with their agreement and their understanding of what Phil's, goals and objectives were. I'm surprised to hear the news on Brandon Jennings. I thought that the success that they have had at times, Brandon Jennings has been really one of the catalysts to that. Look, I think New York is a tough place to try and do what they're doing. And I was a part of it for, like you said, a season and a half. And when you're on that stage and you're basically trying to rebuild and do something that is different. It's not the typical basketball rebuild. You're rebuilding an entire culture through Madison Square Garden, and now it just looks like they have to kind of go back to the drawing board and on and off the court in terms of how we're going to come together and figure out a way to create more success with our team than what we have in recent years.
This is the kind of commentary you're going to get on the new Players Only franchise. It debuts tonight on TNT. It will air the next 5 Mondays of NBA doubleheader action on TNT. Derek Fisher will be on Rockets Pacers at 9:30 p.m. Eastern tonight. Derek Fisher, former president of the NBA Players Association, 18-year vet, 5-time champion. Derek, we appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Maggie.
Now we're going to jump from hoops to hash marks. The NFL Combine is almost here. For more on what to expect, let's welcome in the MMQB's Robert Klemko. Robert, Combine begins on Tuesday. Going to be a little bit different this year. NFL Experience is going to be taking place in Indianapolis. That means fans can watch live the bench press and participate in some of the drills. How do the teams feel about this, and how distracting could it be for the players?
Yeah, I actually remember having a conversation with a fellow sports writer a few years ago and predicting after they sold tickets to Media Day at the Super Bowl that they eventually would sell tickets to the Combine. It's beyond me why anybody would pay to see these guys work out or even watch it on television, but I assume there'll be a large number of fans there. I honestly don't think the teams mind it. I think they'll see what kind of guys are competitors and lit up by the spotlight and by having eyes on their performances. I mean, you've got the strength coaches in there when the guys are doing bench press normally screaming their heads off trying to hype these guys up. So now you don't have to have that artificial hype man anymore. You have actual hype around this thing. I'm sure the Belichicks of the world will be annoyed with the logistics of it, but I don't think it'll be that big of a change.
It's going to be an everyone's snap story, that's for sure. Some controversy, though, around some of the troubled players who were not invited to the Combine. That includes Joe Mixon and Chad Kelly, Ishmael Zamora. Mike Mayock recently spoke out against this. He said the whole reason for the Combine is you want to vet the mental and psychological standing of these young men. Where do you stand on the matter? Do you think they should be invited to the Combine, or should they have to sit out?
Well, I think this was a decision that the NFL made in order to stigmatize these players in a way that says to teams, we don't endorse you drafting these guys. We don't think that they're, draft eligible, for lack of a better term. In the case of Joe Mixon 2.5 years ago, he punched a woman. It was caught on camera on a late night at a bar. He was able to return to the football team. He's a heck of a player, and I think that he will eventually get drafted and will end up in a camp if he's not drafted. But the NFL wants to send a clear message that we don't believe these guys should be in your camp. Not every team, I don't think, is going to follow that. And I think that the teams that know whether or not they want to draft Chad Kelly or Joe Mixon are doing their investigating through other avenues. They've got investigators, scouts, private eyes on college campuses, talking to bartenders, talking to teachers, talking to janitors in the football building. That's the old cliche. But most of these teams will do their due diligence and will have no problem doing it outside of the Combine. The interview, process is important for a lot of these guys. And now the pro day becomes really important for Chad Kelly and Joe Mixon. They're going to be sitting down all day long after they work out with any team that wants to sniff.
4 quarterbacks being talked about as potentially being the first quarterback off the board. Was one of them going to separate themselves at the Combine?
I don't know. I don't see a quarterback in this draft being especially more accomplished or able than anybody else. I think it's a matter of teams identifying the traits that they like in each guy, and then either trying to mask that and keep everybody else in the dark as to who they're going to pick. I'd say Mitch Trubisky has a great chance to do so just because I like him the best, but I think that there are teams that will like each of these guys equally, if not more. And there's a few teams in the first round that we will be willing to take quarterbacks. So I think you're going to see some trades at the top, and I don't think you're going to see a clear leader emerge.
What about Patrick Mahomes? He's being talked about as the quarterback with the biggest chance to impress at the combine. What do you think people are going to learn about him?
Yeah, I mean, he's a kid with a big arm, literally a Major League Baseball arm. He's got a lot of starts under his belt. He's played in, I think, 32 games for Texas Tech, through almost 100 touchdowns, but 29 interceptions in there, which teams don't love to see. Um, the thing about this guy is he comes from the air raid offense, which is kind of stigmatized in the sense that people believe it's you don't have to make a lot of reads, it's all short throws, and that you don't need a quarterback that's accurate down the field. But what's unique about Mahomes is that he actually is accurate down the field. You look at his completion percentage, over 15 yards, over 20 yards, and it compares favorably to Deshaun Kaiser, Trubisky, any of these guys that you want to name. So I think the teams know what they need to know about this guy already, and that what's really going to be big for him is the interview process to demonstrate that he has the intangibles that some of these other guys have.
Robert, quickly, as for the running backs, two players at the top, Leonard Fournette and Dalvin Cook. Who do you have rated higher?
I think it depends on what you want. You know, I hate to use that cop out, but they're two very different backs. I mean, Dalvin Cook is a guy who can catch balls out of the backfield, run outside the tackles. He can be your one back in a shotgun situation or a single back, and do everything you ask him to do, except for grind it out down near the goal line or in short yardage situations. People believe that he's not able to finish as well as Leonard Fournette. Leonard Fournette, Bo Jackson type body, Bo Jackson type abilities, I don't know. But teams love how he breaks tackles, the confidence and poise he has running in between the tackles, the decision making, and the power. He's a kind of back whose career lasts a little bit shorter than a guy like Dalvin Cook. So I think that you'll see Cook go higher, especially because he's better suited to the passing offense. But Fournette could end up having the more impactful career.
Certainly, running back is going to be a position of strength and depth in the 2017 NFL Draft. Robert Klemko of the MMQB.com. We appreciate your time. Thanks, Robert.
Thanks for having me.
Well, it's all anyone is talking about. The Best Picture miscue at the Oscars. And it got us thinking, where have we seen this before? It's not just Steve Harvey. Even in sports, sometimes our coronations have to be put on hold.
La La Land.
There's a mistake. Moonlight, you guys won Best Picture.
Well, it looks like Andrew Peters hasn't left his NHL playing days too far behind. The former enforcer for the Buffalo Sabres was suspended indefinitely for his role in this on-ice melee that you are watching right now. It involved his team, a team of 15 and under hockey players. Peters says he slipped while he was trying to separate one of his players from an opponent. Michael McCann is SI's legal expert. He joins me now for more. All right, and Michael, how much trouble could Andrew Peters be in after watching this tape?
Well, Maggie, he hasn't been charged yet, so that's a good sign for him. But if the police decide to charge him, he could face a bevy of charges. One would be assault, when you hit somebody else and injure them. Another could even be endangerment of a child. The fact that this was a young person who was hit or shoved, depending upon how you want to look at it. Then there's also the possibility of civil liability. He could be sued by the kid that he hit in a civil lawsuit. In addition, he could be suspended by the state amateur athletic association. So there are different legal possibilities, though it does appear he has some type of defense. From what I understand, that I think he's claiming that he slipped and that he was trying to stop an escalation of the fight rather than trying to worsen it. But it does remain to be seen.
It does remain to be seen. And the fact is that perhaps his career stats say it all. 6 NHL seasons, 7 points, 650 penalty minutes. Could his past as an enforcer play a role in this current situation? Could he be looked upon less favorably because of his past?
It's possible, Maggie. And this is also going to be a concern for his team, the Junior Sabres, because if there is a civil lawsuit stemming from this incident, there's no question that the team will be sued as well, because this is typically what happens when a coach or other official is implicated in an incident like this, where if the team is sued as well, the plaintiff, the kid who was hit, will say, why didn't the team know more? The team knew it was hiring an enforcer. This is someone who made a career, as you just mentioned, out of fighting, out of being someone who's a physical player. Should they have known more when they interviewed him? Were there any other incidents while he's been the coach of this team? Have there been incidents during practices that he's been physical? All sorts of questions like that. So, yeah, his past is relevant. Now, his lawyers would say that should all be inadmissible because it goes to character, but it also goes to whether or not he ought to have been hired, whether he ought to have been supervised. I think he also hosts some kind of show called The Enforcer, if I'm not mistaken. So, these are all relevant in the world of should others have known more about what he's doing. But again, in his defense, if he did slip, that changes everything.
Yeah, let's talk about that. If he did slip, could he claim he was wrongfully terminated by being suspended indefinitely if he does get fired eventually?
Maggie, it's hard. I mean, he could, but it's. I think his lawyer would tell him, look, this is pretty bad. This is at a minimum embarrassing, and at best you can try to explain it by saying you slipped. But I think the team is well within its rights to suspend him. I have a hard time thinking that he would have much of a claim over the suspension, but I do think it would help him argue that, look, I slipped. I was actually trying to be the adult in the room. I was trying to stop my players from being injured. I was trying to stop an escalation of the violence. I realized that my past is one where I'm an enforcer, but he could also pivot and say, look, I know a lot about fighting. I know when escalation happens. I have this insight from my own career. I knew what I was doing. Unfortunately, I slipped, but if I hadn't done what I did, it could have been a lot worse.
Can he prove that he slipped?
I don't know. I mean, he's a professional skater, right? I don't know how often.
Good point.
Professional skate, right? He's not exactly an amateur on the ice. So I don't know. I mean, he could say, look, he was moving in a way that caused him to lose balance. I guess that's possible, but I think it's probably a harder argument for a former NHL player to say that he slipped than it would be for most of us.
Michael McCann, Sports Illustrated legal expert. Appreciate your insight, Michael. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Maggie.
All right, moving on. It was 500 miles and about 500 wrecks at Daytona Superspeedway on Sunday. The last man standing was Kurt Busch, who won the race for the first time in his career. Andrew Lawrence was there, and he joins me now. Drew, the picture being painted about the state of NASCAR wasn't very encouraging heading into Daytona. Viewership is down, sponsorships are down. Was the result of this year's 500 race encouraging or discouraging for the sport as a whole?
It was like the perception of the sport, a bit misleading. I'll start with that. And there was sort of much was made of that report going into this race, and there was a lot of pushback from the executive branches of NASCAR and from team owners. I mean, you had heavyweights like Roger Penske and Joe Gibbs, who don't sort of make a habit of you sort of wading into sort of political matters, saying that the report mischaracterizes the relationship between Brian France, who manages the competitive side of NASCAR, and his sister Lisa France Kennedy, who's on the corporate side. And by way of example, citing just the slew of sort of administrative changes and structural changes and competitive changes that the sport has undergone in the last 3 years. Additionally, you sort of have this other story that about just the ratings and the lack of interest that they sort of attack that in two ways. One, they say that perhaps during the boom time years of NASCAR and like 05 or thereabout, that they got a little bit too zealous in building some of these racetracks and making them too big, and now they're having to scale that back. But more largely speaking, like all sports are going through a form of decline, right? We saw, the NFL take a huge television hit this year, the first overtime Super Bowl in history, down in ratings over last year at the same point. So they just feel like the story did not accurately represent, the big picture of the sport. As for the winner, it's not an ideal situation given the sort of that the team Stuart Haas, which seems to always be perpetually in crisis management mode, and Kurt Busch's recent past, which is not all that far away as far as being the first NASCAR driver to be suspended by their domestic violence policy. So the optics aren't great, but that doesn't sort of diminish the showing of a lot of the young, promising talent. I mean, he finished around like two really great young drivers, Ryan Blaney being one of them. And I think that over the long haul, we'll start to see a little bit more of that side of the picture coming into view.
Okay, lots to unpack there, but I want to ask you about this point system because it was on display for the first time. It's not exactly a hit with the drivers like Danica Patrick. Others have spoken out against it. If the new system leads to more wrecks, and ultimately that's a worse product, more wrecks is not fun to watch. Would NASCAR consider abandoning the system mid-season?
I doubt it, and Daytona is sort of a bad, I guess, test event to debut that format just because, it's like Talladega. It's a track that produces carnage and wreckage and that kind of a thing. So I think as we move on to, the mile and a half tracks, Atlanta, and going out west to California and Phoenix, we'll start to see a little bit more orderliness, and the stage process will play out more naturally instead of amid six other major yellow flag, red flag situations.
Okay, well, NASCAR can only hope. They also implemented new safety rules for this season. So we're going to have potentially more aggressive driving, yet also more safety precautions. How is this going to impact the sport? Well,
on the back of all of that, there's also a provision whereby NASCAR is not allowing cars that are too wounded or too broken to re-enter the field. If you get mixed up in a wreck, and you may be well enough to drive, but if your crew guys can't repair your car in 5 minutes and you can't get back up to minimum speed with the pack, you're going to be pruned from the field automatically. So I feel like they can sort of get the balance that they're looking for in terms of safety and competitiveness, and also, not having a car on the track that's like, falling away and causing debris and forcing stoppages in the action.
Yeah, you don't want it to look like the car at the end of the movie Tommy Boy. Andrew Lawrence, appreciate your thoughts on the Daytona 500, and Drew, just fantastic job throughout the years, man. Really loved having you all these times, and can't wait to do it again, okay?
Yeah, me too. Thanks, Maggie.
Appreciate it. That's going to do it for this Monday episode of SI Now. We'll be back tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. Eastern with a fresh look at all the latest sports news. But until then, stick with SI.com, will you? And don't forget to follow us on Twitter at SI Now Live. Enjoy your Monday. We'll see you tomorrow.
James drove his RAV4 hybrid into Hard Knocks Canyon, where he confronted death again and again. But death would have to wait. He earned a man's gratitude and his shirt. How far will you take the all-new RAV4 hybrid? Toyota, let's go places.